Welcome to today's program entitled Termite Mitigation in Schools, a Holistic Approach. This webinar is produced by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Center of Expertise for School IPM. The views expressed by our presenters are for educational purposes only and do not represent the official views or positions of the EPA or the presenters' organizations. This webinar is part of a series of educational school IPM presentations intended to provide you with information on the importance of integrated pest management, or IPM, to student health and the steps needed to establish an effective IPM program. This is Dr. Marcia Anderson with the Center of Expertise for School IPM. I have the pleasure of being your moderator for today's program. I would first like to thank you all for attending today's webinar. Every school has a pest walk, fly, or hitchhike in at one time or another. Today's webinar will discuss how to look for and manage these pests, and in many instances, before they even enter your school. If pests can be prevented from entering your building in the first place, you'll not have to deal with them later on. So our focus today will be on excluding and controlling termites using an integrated pest management approach. But before we introduce our presenters, I'd like to take a few minutes to review integrated pest management and why it's important. Protecting the health of children is a top priority for the Environmental Protection Agency. Children face increased risks to their health when they are unnecessarily exposed to pests and pesticides. For this reason, the EPA recommends that all schools implement programs that promote both the safe use of pesticides and integrated pest management. IPM encourages long-term, sustainable approaches to successfully managing pests. By developing a coordinated IPM program, school leaders demonstrate their commitment to promoting a healthy environment where students are more productive. Effective pesticide safety and IPM programs address not only the safety concerns of using pesticides, but also the causes of why pests are in our schools. This is a proactive rather than a reactive approach that emphasizes the preventative aspects of pest management. As a result, IPM provides schools with an effective and sustainable alternative to pesticide-centric methods. The public is increasingly concerned about environmental health risks posed to children in our nation's schools because youth spend a significant portion of their lives in and around schools. Reducing the unnecessary exposure of students to environmental hazards improves their health and attendance and leads to greater academic achievement and enables them to experience a more productive and higher quality of life. Integrated pest management reduces the unnecessary exposure of students, teachers, and staff to pests and pesticides, reduces pest complaints, and is cost-effective. IPM is a sustainable approach to manage pests since it combines biological, cultural, physical, and chemical tools in a way that minimizes economic, health, and environmental risks. A good IPM program can improve indoor air quality, reduce asthma triggers, and improve school attendance. An effective school IPM program uses common sense strategies to reduce sources of food, water, and shelter for pests in school buildings and on school grounds. IPM programs take advantage of all pest management strategies, including monitoring, exclusion, sanitation, maintenance, physical and mechanical controls, and the judicious use of pesticides. Here on your screen is the IPM pyramid. Note that the biggest part of the IPM pyramid, or the base, is education and communication. Once instructed about IPM, all the people in and around a school can do things that can help prevent or reduce pests. Cultural and sanitation practices include keeping your building and grounds clean and free of debris that attract pests, especially dumpsters, recycling areas, storage closets, and other areas in close proximity to your facility's foundation. Some examples of physical and mechanical controls include sealing all possible pest entry points, such as gaps under doors, around pipes and wire entry points, or other foundation or roof gaps. There is typically less need for pesticides in an IPM program because the practices in the bottom tier of the IPM pyramid leave you with fewer pests with which you need to contend. Now, IPM may require an initial investment in things like sealing pest access points, reducing pest access to food, monitoring for pests, and training staff. But once those staff are trained, they know how to spot and report pests and pest-conducive conditions while going about their everyday tasks. So do what you're already doing, but just think pest. So what are the benefits of school IPM? IPM's smart because it reduces the root cause of pest problems. It is sensible because it creates a safer and healthier learning environment by managing pests and reducing unnecessary exposure to pests and pesticides. And IPM is sustainable because it provides long-term control of pests by reducing their sources of food, water, and shelter in and around schools. Now I'm pleased to introduce our distinguished presenters. Dr. Oy is Director of the Pest Management University at the University of Florida and directs the state school IPM program. She began studying termite biology and behavior as an undergraduate. Mr. Lysenko is the school IPM coordinator and grounds manager for the Manatee County, Florida School District. He coordinates the district's in-house pest control department that provides a full range of pest management services. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, Mr. Lysenko will not be able to be with us today. But not to worry. Dr. Oy works closely with Dan and the Manatee County School District, so she has incorporated a number of school case studies in her talk. Dr. Oy, can you please take it away?
Hi everyone, how are you doing today? So today we're here to talk about termite mitigation in schools, and I'm going to make sure that I have, can you all see that slide? Okay, so thank you. So I have termite mitigation in schools. So what I'm used to is more working with a live audience, and if you don't mind, I have some slides where there are no pictures, just a header, and when those come up, I'd like you to start thinking about some responses and maybe type it in the Q&A box on the side. And another thing that would help me is if you could type in what part of the country or what state you're from as we go through today's presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to start. I found this poster when my son was in the 5th grade in his classroom, and it said, if you can't take the time to do it right, you must make the time to do it over. And this is so true, especially with termite control. So I kind of have this presentation set up along the lines of some of the commonly asked questions that we get from schools concerning termite control. So what is a termite, and should I be concerned since schools are mostly made of steel and concrete? So as you can see here, I'm going to try and use this arrow, we have concerns about content. So yes, our building structures are made of steel and concrete, but we can lose cabinetry, which can be quite expensive to replace, and we can also lose school records if we're not careful. So what is a termite? The workers are blind, soft-bodied insects, and this is going to be really remarkable as we get to the life cycle portion. They squeeze into cracks about the width of a credit card, and it's really the head capsule that's going to be the limiting factor. So I know you've had presentations on rodents already. Once that head of the rodent gets through, the body can get through pretty easily through an opening, and the same is true for termites. Termites live in colonies in cooperation with each other, so you can't just kill one. That's not going to help you with termite control. You have to think about colony management. They have a complex system of chemical communication, again, structurally destructive, and they have been around for over 100 million years. So they're going to be here before us. They were here before us. They're going to be here after us, and we're always going to have job security. So I'm going to go through now the 3 types of termites that we generally run into in structural pest control. And I'm going to do it in order of increasing importance. So you may see dampwood termites on campus. And generally they're going to be in trees and down limbs. So especially if you've been in the south, Florida, we just had a tropical system come through. It's been pretty wet out there. And you may see some of these dampwood termites in some of the fallen branches in the landscape on campus. You can tell that you're dealing with dampwoods because they're a lot larger than you would expect with other termites. And these pellets here at the frass, they're going to be six-sided indentations, but they're not going to be as firm and have that gritty feel like sand between your fingers like drywood termites would. And they're going to be less regular. So again, you're going to find them in tree branches. And I always tell the pest control folks when I give the ID portion, if you can count up to 4, you can do termite identification. So in this case, the dampwood wings have 4 veins, main veins that you can see here, 2, 3, 4. And if you can get that wing to lay very, very flat, you'll be able to see that character, and that's how you're going to know you're dealing with dampwood termites. The control for dampwood termites is simply to get rid of that water source and eliminate that as a conducive condition. The next group of termites I want to talk about are drywood termites, and we see this frequently in schools, especially because we repurpose cabinetry. So we take cabinets from an older school and then we put it into a newer school to kind of save on budget, and that's one way that we transport these termites around and infest new schools as we're building them. So here's the whole life cycle of the termite here: a king, a pseudogate, or a false worker. The soldiers on these are really quite spectacular. So they have this head that we call phragmatic because it is made just about the right size to block the exit holes where those pellets are coming out from. But in the industry, we describe it as a kind of a burnt matchstick head. So it's very characteristic of this group. We also have another group of drywood termites that have a more rectangular shaped head to it, and you can see the mandibles outstretched. And one of the ways that you can tell that you're dealing with drywood termites is this pronotal character here. The pronotum is going to be as wide or wider than the width of the head and the body. Also, the teeth on these drywood they're going to be teeth on the mandibles of the drywood termite. Now take a look at these pellets here. This is going to be really characteristic. And we see this quite frequently in cabinetry or cubby holes that schools have, especially our older schools. They're going to be 6-sided, and you're going to see sometimes that these pellets are of different color. There's not really a correlation between the wood that they're in and the color of the pellets. And sometimes these pellets are confused with drywood, with cockroach frass, German cockroach frass. But you're going to look for these 6-sided indentations, and that's how you're going to know that you're dealing with drywood termites. I see we have some folks from Montana and New York. Anybody else want to chime in on where they're from as we go through this presentation? All right, so let me move on. Oh, Virginia and Maine and Hawaii, awesome. All right, my Hawaii people here. This is very familiar to you. So this is a subterranean termite, but it is also the Formosan subterranean termite. And we know that we're dealing with the Formosan subterranean termite because the pronotum is going to be narrower than the width of the head and the body, but it has a teardrop-shaped head, and the mandibles are going to be smooth on this. So I have a close-up of the mandibles a little bit later on in the presentation. If you are in an area with the Formosan subterranean termite, you definitely want to be mindful of the characteristics that we're going to cover in a little bit here. So our subterranean termites, again, you're going to find them coming up behind expansion joints, behind our very common plastic baseboards that we see in commercial construction. The mud tubes are very characteristic of what we deal with. And in the continental U.S., we're dealing with Reticulatermes genus as a native subterranean termite, and this is probably the most common genus that we're going to have across the continental U.S. So why are termites so hard to kill? They're eusocial. They live in a colony. You can have from a few thousand to millions of them. This is the worker. So this is the worker that is going to do most of the damage here. We have cream-colored body. Here's our soldier cast here. You can tell the soldiers, you're dealing with them because they're going to have a sclerotized head, and the mandibles stick straight out, so they're not very good at feeding themselves. They need these workers to come and feed them. And then we have swarmers. So about once, maybe twice a year, you're going to have swarmers come out. And the last thing that we want in our schools is to have swarmers during testing season. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for us, the termites do tend to swarm when our state standardized tests are going on. It's going to be in that springtime period. So termites belong to a very special group called eusocial insects. And what that means is that there's cooperative brood care, there's overlapping generations, and a reproductive division of labor. All this means is that they help each other out. There's overlapping generations, so sometimes the kids come home to stay. That might be overlapping. It's not exactly like that in social insects, but you have multiple generations living in the same colony. And reproductive division of labor is kind of a mouthful, but what that means is everybody doesn't get to reproduce. And so sometimes I explain it this way. If you're a cockroach, your goal in life is to get your genes into the next generation. And that's not so much with a termite, because this worker form and this soldier form are not able to reproduce. It's only these swarmers or alates, and sometimes they're secondary reproductives, that will have a chance to reproduce. So what that means is we're talking about a caste system here. And it's very important to understand that you have these different forms of termites in a colony. When you want an identification, you want to make sure that you have this soldier or this alate or reproductive caste submitted for identification. The workers, you're going to have to be really good to get those mandibles out and look at the patterns of the teeth on them. So do your extension person a favor and submit alates or soldiers. Our primary reproductives, I'm going to go over a little bit of the forms now. So our primary reproductives, again, we talked about them in terms of being swarmers. They're also called alates. And they'll pair. The estimated lifespan for our natives is about 7 to 10 years. We're not 100% sure about how long these queens will live, but it's pretty long compared to some of the other pests that we're used to seeing in schools. And there was one publication that during a spring swarm, the Fort Lauderdale researchers actually pulled out over 60,000 swarmers from one log that they brought back from the swamps. So they can have quite a high reproductive potential. We also have this form called secondary reproductives. Now, back in the good old days, or the bad old days, however you want to remember them, when Amdrol first came out as a fire ant bait, they used to have a commercial that said, if you kill the queen, then you kill the colony. Well, that's not so true with subterranean termites. If you kill the primary reproductives with subterranean termites and the conditions are just right, you may have secondary reproductives form. And that means you can have replacements on the order of 600, maybe even 1,000 or more, take over that reproductive function for those primary reproductives. So you can't just kill the queen. And I bring this up because the choice of product that we use when we're talking about termite control becomes very important. So some of you have experience in dealing with termites way back in the day when we had pyrethroids. Dragnet was a common termiticide that was out there, and we had just come off having chlordine taken away from the market. We put pyrethroids out there, and we were having a lot of callbacks, as the industry says. And one of the things that could happen, and one of the things that I've seen, is that we had pest control folks doing a very, very good job trying to get a continuous barrier around structures using these what we call repellent termiticides. That's what the industry will refer to them as. And we were trapping termites up in structures. So these secondary reproductives would come in, take over the reproductive function, and we would still have swarms inside of structures. So the product that you choose is going to be very important in terms of getting control. You don't want to have supplementary reproductives taking their place. Soldiers, that's the next caste that we had talked about. So I always tell my students, I went to school back when dirt was formed, and when I learned it, soldiers were important defenders of the colony. We knew that they were a very low percentage of the colony. They need to be fed because their mandibles stick straight out. Here you can see there. And they have a highly sclerotized head, so they're pretty prominent in the colony when you open up a piece of wood. The mandibles are smooth, and let me tell you something. You see this crossing on this Formosan head here? That is not a hard character of the species for Formosan subterranean termites. It's probably an artifact of death. But I hear a lot of folks saying, oh, I know it's the Formosan subterranean termites because the mandibles cross. That's not a character that you'd want to go by. You want to go by this oval-shaped head here. And the reason that it's important for us to get this form, the soldier form, for identification, and for us to be able to identify what termite we're dealing with is, number one, the biology is going to be a little bit different, but from a contract standpoint, if you're working in a state like Florida, there are pest control companies that can exclude Formosan subterranean termites from their contract. So it becomes very important to know what you're dealing with and what you're signing on. So here's a close-up of our workers here. They're the damaging form. They're going to forage for food. They're going to tend the royal pair and the young and the soldiers. They're the ones who are going to build the mud tubes as well. And these mud tubes are going to be evidence for us as we go and do our inspection. They can also defend the colony. They'll fight to the death. So if you're really bored on a Friday afternoon, you can get workers from 2 different colonies, and maybe they'll fight. If you want a certain fight, you can put these termite workers in with ants. Even the littlest ants are probably going to win against these soft-bodied insects. The estimated lifespan for these workers is about a few months to a couple of years. So move on here. So these workers are going to eat cellulose, and the cellulose is just ubiquitous in the environment. It is one of the most abundant materials on the earth, and there are very few organisms that can actually digest it and use it for nutrition. Very complex molecule here, and there's going to be, I think Marcia's got a test for you later, so you might want to take note of the chemical structure of cellulose here. So why subterranean termites cause so much damage? Before I go on, I'm going to give you guys a chance to, if you want to, type questions into the question box. I know I'm kind of working in a vacuum here. I can't see your faces. So if you do have questions, please type away, and we'll make sure to get back with you on that. So why do subterranean termites cause so much damage? Again, they live in a colony, so it's not just one insect doing a lot of damage. You're gonna have to control the colony, so to speak. The colony can be a few thousand to over 10 million. That's one of the highest recorded colony sizes that we have. And territories can be around 200 feet to over an acre. So how do they find our structures? So I have a picture here of maybe a colony out in the environment here, and if you build, and I'm going to show you some pictures of building construction sites in a bit, but if you build, we tend to clear cut, and the wood that's left underneath these structures, we build just right on top of it. So the termites, once they finish feeding down here, they're going to be looking for other things to eat, and oftentimes if we don't have adequate structural protection, it's going to be whatever is sitting on top. So how do termites find these structures? They have foraging guidelines. So here is, it's a dish that we use so you can see the tunneling, the termite tunneling. This is the introduction area here, and this is where the termites, this is the goal for them. So we introduce termites here, and they evenly divide the foraging area, and when they hit that piece of wood, then they start to establish tunnels. And there's another study that came out, probably about 10 years ago, that said termites can actually fit 4 or 5 grains of sand in their mouth at a time. So it's really a lot of work to tunnel and make sure and move that sand around to areas that are not going to interfere with their foraging and getting to different places. Now, because they're blind, soft-bodied insects, they will tend to divide the foraging area equally. but they're kind of like us. If they run into a guideline, they'll probably take the path of least resistance, and they'll follow that guideline in. So you can imagine that this could be a water line or any other kind of conduit that is going into a building. And they're quite able to find their way into structures using these guidelines. This could even be a root of a landscape plant that's planted up real close to the foundation wall of a building. So I'm going to talk to you now that you know the real basics about termite colony and termite biology and how they find their ways into structures, how they impact our schools. So typically, schools do not take an annual renewal contract on termite work that has been done. They typically don't take an annual inspection contract for prevention of termites into the school buildings. And yes, we're steel and concrete, but here you can see this is a school where the swarm happened during testing. So you can imagine how much more interesting those swarming termites were than the Florida state exam for the year. And it was quite a challenge for the teacher to get control back over the classroom again. Now there's evidence behind, clearly evidence when they pulled this bookcase away, but you could see that there was something popping up here, and there was no one actually paying attention to doing an inspection in the classroom to avoid this situation. So disruption is one of those things that termites are really good at if they're swarming. It can also be costly. In this classroom alone, it cost them over $5,000 to replace the cabinetry because the termites had gotten in. And again, notice where these cabinets are sitting. They're on some kind of wall. So there's either got to be an outside foundation wall or some kind of cold joint that the termites are coming up and destroying contents. So it can be very costly. And this was a case where some records were eaten because the records were stored in cardboard boxes, and the termites came up again along this joint here and began eating away at where the boxes were stacked up and eventually got into the records. So termites can cause a lot of havoc and damage in schools. So how do I know that I have termites? So if you can help me, if you can type into the Q&A box some of your responsibilities in the schools, that would help me when we get to the discussion later on. So think about this question: how do I know that I have termites in my school? The first thing I would recommend is that we have to take a little bit of a step back and know the difference between ants and termites, and we also need to know the difference between the two types of termites that commonly infest schools, which would be our drywoods and our subterranean termites. So I'm going to walk you through this and use the old order name. So we have termites on this side and ants here on your right-hand side. And our termites belong to the order Isoptera, and that's the old order name, meaning the wings are have the same shape and size compared to ants, where the ants have larger forewings and a smaller, maybe even shorter hind wing there, so you can tell the difference between ants and termites. If you have a teacher who's panicking in the classroom because there's a swarm going on, or she's unhappy, he's unhappy that it's happening during class time, this is a really quick way to get some kind of diagnosis. I know that there is a tendency to want to clean up when one of these events happens, but I would advise that the instructor to go ahead and leave that evidence for you until you get there so that you can do some kind of diagnosis yourself. The next thing that you would want to notice is that the termites have a broad waist as opposed to a pinched waist here with ants. And finally, if you're really good, you can see that the termites have beaded antennae while the ants have elbowed antennae. So we ask that these insects be preserved in alcohol of some sort if you can't make an identification right away. Now, one of the issues, again, we had talked about earlier is making sure that those wings lay really flat if you're dealing with this swarmer form, and that's going to be the hardest thing to do. Oftentimes, you're going to get what I call crispy critters, And you're going to have to relax those wings in order to get the wing to roll out so that you can count the number of veins from the leading edge. And I'll show you a little bit of that when we get further down. All right, now mud tubes. So I'm watching the Q&A box here. Mud tubes are evidence of what kind of termite? Does anybody want to type in right now? Oh, I have nobody typing in, or do I have people typing in? Yes, Chris Martin, subterranean termites. Thank you very much. Okay, so you can see that this is really extensive damage. This is actually a historic building on the campus of the University of Florida. It's next to building number 1. They were having martial arts classes on the upstairs of this, if you can believe it. Does anybody want to make a suggestion as to what kind of treatment would be effective in a situation like this? I'm watching the Q&A box here. Okay. Centricon, that might work. That might work. So we'll chat a little bit about that in a bit. I have burn it down. That's probably not going to be acceptable. Okay, so we're going to move on from here. Wings are also evidence of infestation. Now, if you saw a pile, I call this a pile of wings. If you had a pile of wings like this, and it was April, May, June, and the bodies are kind of honey-colored, does anybody want to take a guess at what this subterranean termite type species would be? Nobody? Where's my Hawaii folks? Oh. Drywood, that's got to be a really bad infestation to have that drywood pile up like that. Dr. Uh-oh, I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A. Okay, well, I might need some technical support with that. If you see a pile of wings, and I'm talking hundreds of swarmers here, you're probably, there's Robert. Okay, you're dealing with Formosan subterranean termites. And here on the bottom part of your screen, I have a close-up of the wings. So we have 1 vein, 2 veins, that puts it in the subterranean termite category. And the clear area, and you see these hairs here? That's very distinctive for subterranean termites. All right. So thanks, Nab. That's Formosan. You're exactly right there. Does anybody want to put into the Q&A section what they think this did? What kind of termite did this, the frassum pellets? Now this termite has clean galleries, and it feeds across the grain of the wood. And I got a bunch of folks who jumped in and said drywood termites. Exactly right. So the drywood termites here, they feed against the grain of the wood. There's no mud associated in the galleries because there's no connection to the ground. So here you see a nice close-up of the 6-sided pellets, and that's going to be characteristic of your drywood termites. This is going to be really important for us to be able to tell the difference between anthill termites and the subterranean termites and drywood termites, because it goes to what kind of treatment we're gonna end up having. So other things for evidence of infestation, if you can get the time of the swarm, is it day, dusk, or evening, and the month, that would be really helpful, because we know that our native subterranean termites, if you're in the south, like the south of Miami, and you start working your way up, we start swarming, our spring swarm actually starts in the last week of December, and then kind of increases through time, and our native subterranean termites probably go through April. And if you're in Formosan territory, April through June, and that overlaps almost exactly with the swarm time for drywood termites. So all of these things put together will kind of help get you a profile of what kind of termite you're dealing with. Every once and again, we're going to get lucky and get a specimen in alcohol, but oftentimes we're just going to have to put the pieces of the puzzle together. So I put this picture up here a lot when I give presentations on termites, because this case study was quite interesting. This is a really good pest control operator. This is foam board going below grade, because we've used a lot of foam board for energy conservation, and we see it a lot in lead construction in schools. When this blue board goes below grade, termites will get up into it, and you've lost your R factor anyway, so it's not going to be helpful. It's not going to be useful once the termites have penetrated it. But what it also has done is it's created a conducive condition. And this was back in the day before Termidor. So I'm kind of showing my age now that I've had enough of these case studies. But this pest control operator went back 3 years in a row and put hundreds of gallons into this front porch. And these tubes are actually termites trying to get back down into the soil, because he had cut them off with a repellent termiticide. And this house swarmed for 3 years out this wall. So we want to be really careful about the product that we picked and where we're going to put it. Okay, so we did this one. What did that damage? Isn't that a gorgeous close-up? Anybody want to put in the Q&A section again? What did this damage? Type. Okay, so this is to show you the pellet size in relation to the gallery. So thank you very much. All right, so I want to give you a case study from a school. So this is my good friend Dan. We've been on several of these missions together, and one of the things that I really like about our school IPM program is that we're able to rely on each other and each other's expertise as a coalition. So we went to this particular school, which was not in Dan's district, and he drove across the state to help me figure this one out. It was a concrete structure, and the only piece of wood in there was the floor. So we went and pulled it out. Now, I will tell you that the school had already a quote in hand for a $60,000 fumigation. So does anybody want to type in the Q&A box what kind of termites get treated with a fumigation? So we pull this up. Yep, drywood termites. They're the ones that get we do fumigation for. But we pull this up, and it's old subterranean termite damage. We found no live termites in there. So our recommendation to the school, and this was a complete concrete structure. There was just a breach at this corner here. Our recommendation to the school was to replace this flooring, treat it with some borate just in case, put it back down, and then monitor it. And they were able to repair this threshold for under $100. And we never got a call back on having any other problems with termites since. But understanding the importance of species identification and what kind of control recommendations you would make is very important. Now, would you fumigate for subterranean termites? Type into the Q&A box, please. Do you fumigate for subterranean termites? No. Okay, I'm getting a lot of them. No. So one of the reasons that we don't fumigate for subterranean termites is that once the tarps come off and once the structure is aerated, there's no residual. And so the termites could easily come back the next day. And especially if you're in Formosan subterranean termite territory, it becomes quite a problem if you don't have a residual to stop the termites from coming back into the structure after aeration. So no fumigation for subterranean termites unless it's a really unusual circumstance and you've been able to cut those termites off from the ground. All right, here's another case study that Dan and I were called into, and this also had a quote for a very expensive fumigation. And these cabinets here were brought in from these cabinets, all of them, were brought in from another school. This is a brand new school, and they were repurposed and refit to this school here. Sometimes not having the best custodial can help you. So we crawled up underneath those the cabinets, and we're able to find wings, and we're able to pound out some pellets from the cabinet up above, and it turned out to be a very localized infestation of drywood termites. So once again, the fumigation, the complete fumigation was not necessary. It was really something that was easily taken care of by replacing a piece of the cabinet. That's all we had to do. So understanding how these termites move. Drywood termites move very, very slowly. It's not like subterranean termites where you're building on top of a structure. You could be building on top of a very large colony. These drywood termites typically have smaller colonies, and sometimes wood replacement in a school situation is going to be your best option. So does anybody have any questions up until this point about knowing what a drywood termite infestation would look like versus a subterranean termite infestation? Oh, okay. So let's match the treatment. So somebody tell me, what am I pointing at here? What kind of treatment is this? If you see tarps coming down the side of a building. Tent. Okay, tenting is a sign of what kind of treatment? Fumigation, exactly right. And fumigation matches to what kind of termite? What are we dealing with? Oh, I got a lot of fumigations here. Okay, drywood. So this tent here is going to match with this kind of termite. Now, at the University of Florida, because we are also a state institution, we tend to let things go, our infrastructure. So this is one of the dorms, and the year before we did the chemistry building, which had not been treated for drywood termites for over 30 years. And it took them all Thanksgiving long to do that tenting. They had to take down every single lightning rod on the top of the building. It was over 1 million cubes. So that was quite a big fumigation. And a lot of times our schools are going to be in the same boat because of the volume. They charge you in fumigation because of volume. So we don't want to get to that point. Doing a little bit of inspection as part of your IPM plan and preventative maintenance will go a really long way. All right, somebody tell me what kind of termite, need my arrow back here, what are we doing here? And what kind of termite are we trying to treat? Okay, we're trying to treat subs, right? So we have a training house here in Florida, and we actually let it get infested, and it swarmed a couple of years ago. So here are the dead swarmers at March around the threshold of the door here. And so this kind of treatment, this drilling, would go with your subterranean termites. In schools, I tend not to see a lot of drilling. I tend to see a lot of perimeter treatments and trench and treats. And that could be fine in many cases, but sometimes our slabs are so large, it is very important for us to know where the termites are coming up from and put our treatment where the termites are. So somebody, what can you tell me about this? What termite did this? Subs. Okay, what else can you tell me about the building construction and the size of the tube using this concrete block? Yeah, it's a subterranean termite. It's a huge tube. So the size of the block, it's 16 inches, right? 16 inches by 8 inches. And my pest control guy, when he found this mud tube, he was so excited. That's the size of his hand across the base of that tube. And this was actually not Formosan subterranean termite, but our native subterranean termites. So you can imagine that this space here wasn't disturbed at all. All right, so I'm going to transition us over now to the if you can count to 4 part, which is the termite ID part of the presentation. So here we have 2 veins here, 1, 2, with a clear area. Oops, I cannot drag that arrow, with a clear area here. And this schematic is beautiful, and it's easy to see, and the wing is laid out exactly perfectly. So somebody tell me which termite this belongs to, which group. I got no takers. Oh, Brian, okay, yes, it's a subterranean termite. It's excellent. That's what it kind of looks like. That is what it looks like. And this is almost a perfect mount. So it does look a little bit differently when you have the actual wing in front of you. So this is what the visual would look like. Now, somebody tell me, who does this wing belong to? Formosan, exactly. And you know that because there are hairs on the wings here. So it's still two veins with a clear area in between. And if you look really closely, you're going to see the hairs on that wing. And this Formosan subterranean termite, again, depending on what state you're in, read those contracts really carefully. So the family is going to be Rhinotermitidae, and the genus is going to be Coptotermes. And I'm not going to throw out too many of those scientific names right now, but the internet has really changed the game for us in terms of information, and a lot of folks are going to do research before they call you, so you probably want to know at least what it sounds like. So here is, I think I stole this from one of Dr. Forster's publications. Here's a size range of native subterranean termites that we have in the southeast. But they're all going to be kind of dark-bodied, and they're going to have those two veins going across the top of the wing. So our drywood termites have three veins. The Cryptotermes brevis is one species of drywood termite that is commonly found in furniture, and that's how it gets transported. So 1, 2, 3, it's very difficult to lay that wing flat. This median vein occurs in just a fraction, maybe a third of the sample that you bring in. So another point that's really important is to get more than one wing to help us in the identification. We can get it to the group, but if you need it to be more specific than that, get us as many wings as possible. And we saw this already. This is our dampwood termite, 1, 2, 3, 4 veins from the top. And these mostly going to be outside in branches, sometimes portables that have really bad moisture damage on the fascia, or the branches are sitting on the roof. Sometimes that happens. You may see something like this, but it's not going to be common. So our subterranean termites, the pronotum, again, is going to be wider than the width of the head for our non-subs, and you're going to see teeth on the mandible. And for our subs, the pronotum is going to be narrower than the width of the head, and the mandibles will be smooth. So some really pretty pictures here of the teeth, and smooth. So here's some commonly encountered subterranean termites. So I'm going to let somebody take a best guess as to the species. So we know we're dealing with reticular termes, but does anybody want to take a guess at what species we're dealing with? I know I've got some folks out there who can do this. Oh, I'm not seeing. Oh, yes, it's flavipes. So reticular termes flavipes here. If you look at this ocelli, so that's your single eye, and the compound eye, what you see here is the distance between this compound eye and this ocelli is greater than the diameter of that single eye. Yeah, I know, it sounds like a tongue twister, but that's how some of those keys are made up. And one of the reasons that I put this up here is, remember early on in the presentation, we talked about how termites were blind, soft-bodied insects. Well, as they go through their life cycle and become some of them will become swarmers, they develop these simple and compound eyes. And I think it's just so cool that something that starts off seemingly like a blind, soft-bodied insect can have the potential, at least part of that colony has the potential, to then sprout these eyeballs in the end. So Coptotermes formosanus is a less common subterranean termite. If you're in Florida and I think it's probably just Florida right now that we're going to be worried about the Asian termite, which is Coptotermes destri. And some of you may have heard the news release of a laboratory study where Coptotermes formosanus and Coptotermes destri were crossed, and the growth of the colony of the cross was double that of either the parent colonies, which kind of hit the news in a big way for us. So here's a less encountered subterranean termite, which is Coptotermes formosanus. Now, inspection is going to be the key to termite management. So how would you conduct an inspection? You want to be systematic. You've got to know the tools of the trade. I'm going to get into this part about asking you to think about what recommendations you would make. A lot of you guys are going to see this, these IR cameras and Termitracks, and there's some really cool technologies that are out there, but I will have the caveat that if your technician is not well trained in how to do an inspection, it's only going to, giving the technician any kind of technology is only going to make them worse. So we actually have these drones in pest control right now. So here's one of my guys. This is our training house. He had this bot go underneath the structure. It can take pictures. It's a little grainy. I'd still want to put my eyes on what's going on underneath the structure there. But it's like a video game, right? So a lot of our younger technicians, they love this stuff. My best recommendation is to get a good flashlight. When I started IPM, school IPM, the first flashlight that I had was 60 lumens, and it was $60. You can get over 100 lumens. You can get 1,000 lumens for 10 or 20 bucks right now on Amazon. So check out Amazon. Lighting is really cheap. Not only get the flashlight, but learn how to use it. So you see how this guy is holding it not perpendicular to the wall, but parallel. And if you roll that flashlight down the wall, you can see imperfections that may be made by any kind of water damage or maybe even termites. Get a probe. So some of you know who I am, and I'm vertically challenged, so I use my probe a lot. But even if you're not vertically challenged, sometimes it's very nice just to have that probe to poke at things and see if you're dealing with some soft wood behind there. I also like having a moisture meter. These moisture meters are fabulous for detecting and confirming whether you're going to have moisture. So I went to a 4-H cabin actually in the Panhandle of Florida, and I thought that this would come up with a very high moisture reading because it looked like the wood was wet. When we put our moisture meter on it, not so much. So the contractor I was working with was so amazed and just loved this new toy that we had. And we made him, so you guys who do termite work a lot, you can see this tube here. But we made him put it up where we knew formosans were going to be, and this moisture meter pegged out to 30%. He went upstairs, cut out just about where we had really high moisture readings, and look what we found. So moisture meters and these tools can really help you if you know how to do a systematic inspection to start with. Use a measuring wheel. They're really cheap at Lowe's and Home Depot right now, and I use it in the context of creating a graph. So a lot of folks in schools, you might be working in shifts, you might be working in teams. Having some kind of record and documentation is all part of that IPM process, and having a really good map can help you not only identify where termites might be an issue, but other pests as well. So graphing is very important. On those graphs, you can list places of conducive condition. And just know that termite prevention recommendations really haven't changed in about 80 years. So wood to ground contact, plants with roots leading to the foundation, watering walls, no inspection space, moisture, these are all things that are a problem. We have some very odd construction, and folks might think that it looks really pretty to put, here's your wall, and about 6 inches of space with mulch and a plant. And they knew that it was going to be a conducive condition because they put Centricon right next to it with a sidewalk. So I don't know who does that, but we see it every once and again. Conducive conditions can start before construction, and some of you are in areas where your schools are coming up very quickly. So just be mindful that you want to take out all that wood debris. Not every site is going to look this clean. We oftentimes get sites like this where they're just going to shave off the top and not worry about what's below because it's not visible. You might find concrete form boards and stakes left in. So if you have a swarm in the middle of the floor, think about where that stake might be, that grade stake might be. Insulation below grade is another issue that we see commonly, even in schools, for energy conservation, but it's really a termite issue. Foam block below grade, these are really common construction practices that cut down the cost of construction, but could become a termite issue in the future. Landscaping, definitely a problem. So this is the entomology building, here actually, when it was first built, because the architects thought that this was going to be something that was that would save energy, and indeed it probably did cool the building off, but we swarmed at the back of this building every year, and they eventually had to take this berm down because it created conducive conditions. Some of you may be at schools where this very pokey holly is all the way around, and it can impede your inspection process. You can get behind this holly if you just drop a tarp over it, and you can walk between the wall and the holly without getting poked if you have a tarp there. And you all have seen this before at the schools. Now this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. Clean those gutters out. That will also create a conducive condition. So inspection is the key to termite management. Think about your schools and what recommendations you would make. Do you have a quality control process? I got to finish up here in a minute or so. But what to observe with vendors? Did they do an inspection to identify where and how the termites are entering? Can they tell you what slab type you have and how termites might be entering? And this goes to your treatment recommendations. It's easy to check if you're getting the correct treatment. You can. This is what our DAX inspectors do. They'll match the gallons you purchased and the gallons that you used or were required to use for an area you were supposed to treat. Some contractors will require mixing on site, so that they know the number of gallons that they have purchased are actually going into the tank and going out onto the property. So does anybody have any comments or questions at this point? You guys can type those into the box, and I'm going to kind of continue us on here. So I have a case study here that this is an inspection back before the labels were going to allow drilling on 12-inch centers. So here's my inspection flashlight, and it's 6 inches. So this is about 24 inches, the drill holes here. So not only were they violating the label because there was too much space between the drill holes, you guys are going to love this, the drill holes didn't even go all the way through the concrete slab. So how are you supposed to do a treatment with just partial drill holes? Now, I will say that this is the only time I've ever seen this in a school, but the fact that we did see it was disturbing. So knowing your slab type is going to be really important, and this is something that can maybe help you have a conversation with the technician who's actually going to do the treatment. Start by asking that technician if they know what slab type it is, because this goes directly to how many gallons they're going to be putting out if they're doing a liquid termiticide treatment, and if they know where the termites might be coming up from. So does anybody want to type into the Q&A box what kind of slab this is? No typing? No typing. It's a monolithic slab. So it's a one pour here. So the places, because it's a one pour, so here's your footer, and here's the pour. Places that termites could come in from would be your cracks in the slab, outside foundation wall, especially if you have some kind of veneer, and oftentimes in schools it's going to be red brick veneer. We're seeing some stucco and some drive-it as well, but termites can come up between this space here. Okay, anybody want to take a guess at what kind of slab type this is? Yes, no, yes, no. I got no typing going on, guys. Okay. Floating, yay. Okay, it's a floating slab here. And it's floating between where the foundation is, the slab is. Most commercial slabs are going to be about 6 inches thick. Termites can access from this side here or also on the outside foundation wall. So this is where your treatment would be directed or targeted. One more. Okay, anybody? Guesses? Supported. All right, Janet. Termite access. This is supported slab, so you can see that the slab is supported here to stem wall foundation. This is kind of a nightmare to treat if you actually have a termite infestation where the termites are accessing through the block or through a plumbing penetration. It'll require a lot of drilling. So this is just to give you a visual of some of the pipes and conduits or the electrical service that you may have even in commercial construction. These pipes here, the water pipes, they're not a direct or a straight shot. And if you have wall covering in front of these pipes, it's hard to know sometimes where they're coming up from below grade. So what to expect when you're working with a pest control company? Or maybe it's what to ask when you're working with a pest control company. The first thing that I would do is ask if they're licensed to do termite work. We did a survey in our state, and we actually had one school district where the pest control company was not licensed with the state of Florida. So that's the first thing that you want to do is make sure that they're licensed to do work in the state that you're in. Have they done any termites on commercial buildings, termite treatments? So residential work and commercial work is going to be is different, and so you want to pick a vendor who's going to have experience in dealing with commercial construction and understand commercial construction. And the second thing is, will they warranty their work? And if they're not going to warranty their work, you want to know why. Sometimes it's because the buildings already have conducive conditions that are not going to be very easily treatable for the company, and I understand that, but oftentimes schools decline the warranty, and I don't understand that. So we want to make sure that there's a reason why that the work is not, there's not an offer at least to warranty. So I'm going to go through this list here of successful things that you need to know for successful termite jobs. And in the meanwhile, if you have questions, I see we have some questions here in the Q&A section. Go ahead and start typing them up, and we'll start answering them as we go through the rest of this list here. So successful termite jobs. Whoever is doing the work and who is contracting the work, you got to know which termite you're dealing with. Are they subterranean termites or drywoods? Who's doing the work? They should know what construction type you have. And they can start with doing a basic, got to know what slab type I'm dealing with, but oftentimes property appraiser's office will have plans on site or on the web, and you can get the plans and start to study the building construction type that you have. Your applicator and maybe even the purchasing or your IPM coordinator should understand the product label, and I would ask for that ahead of time and understand what the product rates are. Know what 1 per 10, 2 per 10, and 4 per 10 means, because this goes to the kind of treatment and the quality of treatment that you're going to receive. The other thing that's really important is rig calibration, and we tend not to talk about that in school IPM because we tend not to use a lot of gallonage most of the time, but termite work is one place where you might need to have an understanding of how rigs are calibrated. If somebody comes to your school and they're going to treat, 10,000 square feet, and they're only there for 10 minutes, that's not enough time, and that's not enough product going out. So this is also kind of getting, I wouldn't say it's getting down into the weeds, but it goes to effective application. You want to have the proper tips, and you want to know that the technician who's applying the termiticide knows how to use those tips. So if you're doing a 180 or a 360, they need to know which direction the spray is going to go so you have an effective treatment. So mixing on site, we'll come back to that. That's kind of important sometimes. You want to know that enough product is going down. And calculations, this is a whole other class. Doing the math for termite work is not trivial, and there are a lot of calculations that are involved. If the technician understands the rig and how it's calibrated, they might not have the total gallonage off the top of their head, but they should come close to somebody who's actually done the math based on the maps that you have there. So there's a lot that goes into termite work. I kind of gave you the 35,000-foot view of termite mitigation in schools, and I will take any questions that we have right now. So I'm going back up through our list here. So, Marcia, are we good to start answering some of these questions that have come up in the Q&A?
Not yet. Just give me a minute, okay? Have
Okay,
a few announcements, and then we'll go in with our Q&A. Dr. Roy, I'd like to thank you for your insight and insightful guidance on termite biology, IPM control, and avoidance in and under our school buildings. Just phenomenal presentation. Okay, hold on. Okay, well, we've completed our webinars for this school year, and we hope you've enjoyed them. If you missed any of them or wish to review any of them, please visit our school IPM website at epa.gov, Managing Pests Schools. And most of these webinars are the recorded versions with the closed captioning are already posted, and the remainder, including this one on termites, will be posted shortly. We're now in the process of developing next year's webinar series to resume in September. So stay tuned for more information later this summer. And I just wanted to mention, as an attendee of today's webinar, you can download a certificate of attendance. For some of you, these certificates will provide supportive documentation for continuing education credits, and you'll be sent a link a few hours after the webinar to print your own certificate. I would like to mention that the school IPM listserv is our way to assist and motivate those in the school community to start, grow, and sustain your IPM programs. By subscribing, you'll receive invitations to upcoming webinars, highlights from and links to IPM-related newsletters, updates on EPA's school IPM activities, along with other pertinent announcements. To sign up for our listserv, just go to our website, or you can email us at school.ipm@epa.gov. And thank you again to our great presenter, Dr. Faith Oy, and to each and every one of you, our audience, for participating in this webinar. In time, after the webinar is concluded, a list of all questions and answers are going to be provided on our website, along with a set of resource links, the PDF of the PowerPoint slides, and in time the recorded presentation. We will also be located on the same webpage. Following are a short series of questions designed for us to serve you better. Please help us to help you and others by answering these short questions. Now we'll entertain your questions. We'll begin with your questions that you posed during the webinar in the question pod, and please feel free to add any other questions to the pod now. Any questions that are not answered during this 20-minute Q&A session will still be answered by our presenter and placed out on our webpage. So without further ado, the first question is, what's a high moisture level?
So your moisture meter probably goes up to about 28 or 30%. And when it gives you that really angry beep at 28 or 30%, that's a high moisture level.
Okay, next. So even for drywood termites, moisture will indicate an infestation?
Not so much. So drywood termites, probably, you're looking at wood that's going to be, they can live in wood that's about 10 to 15%. That's really kind of dry, but not so much.
Okay. And the last question I have here is, what besides tenting can you use?
For drywood termites?
I assume so.
Okay, so what besides tenting, so drywood termites start as a pair, and if you do inspections on a regular basis and you find them very early on, you can do wood removal. That's number one. The second thing is sometimes a borate treatment or any targeted treatment into the gallery would be helpful. And a lot of pest control companies would recommend that. Now, you have to have a really good inspector because you have to be able to know where those termites are and where the galleries are. So that's option number 2. The third thing that you could do, and that would be a spot treatment, by the way, you could dust. So there is actually Termidor dust and some other dusts that are out there that are quite effective, but dusting is a lost art. So you need to have somebody who actually knows how to dust. And then, of course, the third is going to be the fumigation for fourth.
Okay, I'm seeing a couple other questions right here. Let me see if I can expand this. We have buildings with tile roofs. I can't read the question. Ooh. Okay, do you recommend heat treatment?
Okay, so heat treatments are also, they're popular out west, and it's possible, but again, you're going to have to identify where the termites are in order to do the heat treatment. And these drywood termites can move in the galleries, so that's just a caution on that as well. But heat can be very effective.
Okay. Just checking for any other questions. Okay, well, I think at this point we're going to end the Q&A. If a few more questions come up, we will certainly include them in our printed Q&A information when we do wind up putting it up on the website. So even if you had typed in something and we can't seem to quite find it, it will reappear and we'll definitely answer. So, oh, wait a minute. We got something. We just found one. Okay. Let's see. As you discussed, and something I come across all the time, is landscaping and mulch in direct contact with the structure. Do you recommend mulch and vegetation be pulled back from the foundation to leave a bare ground barrier, or is there an alternative material like rocks or grass that may better reduce moisture retaining conditions?
So we like mulch for a number of reasons around our landscape, not the least of which it stops splash up on the side of the wall. So bare ground is usually not acceptable to landscapers. So as a compromise, we like to have that mulch put out in a very thin layer to encourage the natural drying cycle, because desiccation is going to be the termites' #1 enemy. So that's one option that you have if you want to continue on with a natural mulch. I used to be in favor of some of those, I guess they're pea gravel type mulches. Well, there was a study that came out in the early 2000s where they had pea gravel and they had this recycled tire or some kind of rubberized material that they were putting in playgrounds, and they had some natural mulches, and they put cardboard underneath those different mulches, and the pea gravel actually had the highest consumption of by termites on the cardboard over the natural mulches. And one of the hypotheses is that the termites basically can walk through the gravel to get to the food. So while the gravel is really good for drainage, if you're in a high termite pressure area, you might want to go a different route.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, does that answer the question?
Another question, do you have any information on whether diatomaceous earth works on control of termites?
I can do it in the lab. Diatomaceous earth, that tends to come up a lot in terms of green control. It's not something that I would recommend for subterranean termites. There may be some data for drywood termites, but I wouldn't recommend that for drywoods either at this point.
Okay, fair enough. Next one, I believe this is our last question. How does the insecticide work on the termites? Do they ingest it or what?
Oh, that's a really good question. So there are a couple of ways that you can get insecticides and termites to kind of get together. One is the liquid, and ingestion or per os oral is definitely one way that the termites will get enough of the termiticide into them to kill them. And the baits are the second thing that we didn't talk about so much in this presentation, but baits, a lot of the ones that are still out there would be, well, one is Centricon and the other one is Traylona by BASF. They're insect growth regulators, and so it still is oral, it's still digestion, but it's going to impact the deposition of cuticle, and that's a different mode of action than something like termites tunneling through treated soil, soil that's been treated by fipronil.
Well, thank you, Faith, for an absolutely phenomenal presentation. You really got the audience engaged, and it was a great cap to the end of our series for this school year. So I want to thank everybody again, and thank you again, Faith. At this point, we'll say goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.